Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the seminar by Dr. Roberto Martinez-Maldonado. Okay, Maldonado, yes. Yeah, so it's actually, well, first of all, I'm Nancy Law. I'm the Deputy Director for the Center for IT Education, which is hosting this seminar. And I think we have a large audience online as well, and welcome to our online audience. The talk for today is a very topical one, and I think all of us are very interested in AI, but actually Roberto's work actually began a long while back, and he is an associate professor of learning analytics at the Faculty of Information Technology in Melbourne at Monash University. And he's actually, he's very well known for his work in the area of data storytelling and learning analytics, because he's a firm believer of human-centered, technology to support learning. I'm not going to, I'll just say a little bit more. He's also associate chair of the Learning and Education Subcommittee of the SIT for Computer-Human Interaction Conference on Human Factors in Computer Systems, and an associate editor of the International Journal of AI in Education. And Roberto is on his way to the Learning Analytics and Knowledge Conference, and we are very lucky to have him with us for from today until Wednesday. So without further ado, may I invite all of you to join me in welcoming Roberto.
I just wonder if I need a microphone, maybe
Yes.
if someone
Yes,
someone in the online can.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I need it. Okay. So thank you so much for a very nice introduction, I think.
I think it works, right?
Yes. And thank you so much for coming as well. Thank you, myself. No. Okay. Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation. And I would like to share a little bit of what we're doing in Monash University. Monash University is in Melbourne. And I'm very excited to be back in Hong Kong. Last time I came was in 2011 for a conference that was organized by the same group, by Nancy's group. And I just don't remember how the city looked like back then. I remember how it was, but I just cannot recognize it now. It's so different. And I know that people from Monash have come here, but I just want to give a brief overview of the center where I work. So I belong to the Center for Learning Analytics at Monash. Monash is in Melbourne, Australia. And it's a quite large group for being a learning analytics group. We have around 12 faculty members, 4 teaching fellows, research fellows, which are postdocs, and those professional staff, and lots of PhD students as well, working different exciting projects. And because I know that the time is precious, I'm going to focus on a few of those projects and just sharing what we're doing. But with one message in mind, which is what Nancy also mentioned, I really like human-centeredness of using AI or learning analytics in education. So I'm going to try to, that when you go home, at least you get that idea of why is human-centered important. And let's see what's going on with this. Yeah. So these are a very large overview of, or high-level overview of the focus areas where we work on. So you can see there that there is analytics for self-regulated learning and collaborative learning. There's a big area in our center. And we also have human-centered learning analytics. That's something I really like to work on. And we have multimodal, analytics for assessment, workplace analytics, and human AI analytics is something that is also emerging in our team. And we have different partners, and there's an overview of the people who have been working in the projects that I'm gonna be focusing on. So I would like to start with a definition of learning analytics, right? And it's a definition of that is linked with some of the things that I know some of you already work on in here, which I call the human-centered learning analytics view perspective. So when we look at the students, if we really recognize that we're talking with humans, there's lots of complexity in them. There is motivation, feeling, dispositions to learning, interactions with other students, even different worldviews, and then we have interactions. This is playing a bit funny, and then they are immersed in a learning situation where there is a intended learning design, usually proposed by the educators, and we have the systemic sides or tasks, the tools that are being used, and also the social arrangement around that tool usage and around the task, right? So, and then that's the whole complexity of the situation. And where are the analytics here? Well, in those interactions with systems, we can capture data, but we can already realize that not everything is going to be mediated by devices that can capture certain things. There's many more things. Okay, but with that partial evidence that we can get, if the learning situation is fully online, probably is a bit more representative of what's happening. Those interactions are being captured. Then we get the data. We need to give meaning to that data. The data in itself can mean too many things sometimes. So you need the context. And that's why we need the understanding of the learning design. And then somehow we get into the thinking. Into the actual analysis of that data and representations of that data, and ideally the whole technical part of the system, which involves the data, becomes part of this larger socio-technical system. This is the idea, right? This is what I call the rebooted human-centered analytics situation, because when we start creating, especially if I'm coming from a faculty of IT or computer science, and we sometimes collaborate with others, other researchers that are not in faculties of education, but more in computer science, we tend to forget a few of these elements. And this is not comprehensive. You know? We know that education is very complex, learning is very human. And actually, maybe if I remember, when I came to CSTL in 2011 in Hong Kong, there's this conference of computer support collaborative learning. I remember I was doing my PhD, and I proposed something similar to this, which are visualizations of what are the students doing in these interactive tabletops. So I've been working since then on creating interfaces that represent the data in some way. I didn't call it learn analytics back then, but just visualizations of collaborative learning or collaborations. And the idea was that if you show something to students, maybe somehow they are going to reflect on what they should be doing or what they didn't do, and that improves learning. Or if we show it to the teacher, and the teacher is going to have the expertise to make an intervention, provide better feedback. So that was the idea of showing something in real time or almost real time to the teacher in the form of a dashboard, right? And this idea of the dashboards is widespread in learning analytics, in lots of educational technology products. We see dashboards, and sometimes is the tool that we have in our mind when we think, okay, let's build something to help teachers or students to do something with the data. Oh, a dashboard. Maybe there's lots of products, but let's have a look at a recent literature review on dashboards that show how these dashboards have been evolving a long time. This is from 2024, and they did an analysis up to 2022. And something interesting was that the dashboards around 10 years ago were focused on supporting monitoring, awareness, comparison, very basic analysis was required, simply presenting visualizations in the way I was doing, just counting things, counting numbers, and then presenting them, and maybe that supports and enhances awareness. And then things start to become, well, there's more dashboards, but also, qualitatively speaking, the dashboards started to become more complex. Now, included a bit more of predictive modeling into them, so more recommendations, so more feedback. So it's very interesting to see this trend. Obviously, there was a drop in 2021, and might be why. And then I think we can imagine that now dashboards are becoming a bit more multimodal. That's another thing that these authors discover. With multimodal, they mean now we can have access to multiple systems that students are interacting with, so multiple sources of information. That then this makes the complexity of the dashboards go higher in terms of analysis, in terms of the actual design. And there's a trend as well. This is a little review of reviews of dashboards. There was a review on 2017, 18, 2019, 2021. We already look at 2024, and consistently, and other reviews that I have talked about other issues, but consistently in the first line, those reviews found that it's really hard for students to make sense of dashboards. There's other research that shows, and showed like 15 years ago, that students in general in higher education already with a STEM degree, they sometimes don't understand the simple graphs that teachers are showing in their classes. So imagine what happens when those graphs are part of a dashboard. So it's a design problem, it's a design challenge, and it's also a visualization literacy challenge. Plus other things, the same applies for teachers, and other issues like addressing concepts of justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. So there's a bunch of things around the design of this dashboard. And why am I using that word design over and over? Because design is a fundamental part of learning analytics. So if we consider learning analytics or AI in education, we immediately think, or education, learning, there is a theory or educational theory component, data science, analytics, AI, there is a data science component, but there's also a design component, not only learning design, because that's something that definitely excites us in education. I was for 2 years postdoc in a faculty of education. Everything was about the design. I love it, especially the learning design, but also the design of the interfaces and design broadly speaking. So those are the three areas within learning analytics that we shouldn't forget that they need to be there. There are the three pillars. So why then talking about designing and a way to introduce the importance of human-centered design in AI, in education, and learning analytics is when we see things like this. What happens when a group of men are the ones that decide for women, also what's better for women. And the same can happen. What happens if a group of overrepresented people are deciding for underrepresented people, or in any other combination? So that is called designing for, when someone designs for someone else, and even if they have the best of intentions, it's not the same as people designing with the people who are going to use the systems, who are going to be impacted by the systems, etc. So this goes beyond learning analytics. It's something that motivates the use of human-centered design perspectives. And that's why I wanted to emphasize this human-centeredness and talk about a few projects that we've been doing with that lens. So what is that process? What is human-centered design? And let's go straight to learn analytics. So there is a group of people who have been working on trying to understand, okay, what do we mean by human-centeredness in education when we are talking about designing or using AI and analytics? This is a working definition where we highlighted some terms. Like we're talking about developing systems that are trustworthy, reliable, that augment and support capabilities instead of replacing. So that's something that very easily can happen very easily. It happened when there was the boom of intelligent tutoring systems a few decades before, where the idea was to give one tutor to each student. So that means pretty much replacing, they're thinking about not needing human teachers. No, that was the whole notion that we had a few decades ago, and that can easily happen now, right? So not only for teachers, not only for education, but in different areas. So within AI, one whole perspective is that we should use AI to augment what humans can do, so we don't get irrelevant. So that's why that word is there, just augmenting, supporting, and also aligning with intentions, preferences, interests, values, and I would include there the learning design as well. So let's just unpack that human-centeredness and how it has been done. There are different ways to do human-centered design. This is just one way, which is, if I guess, how many of you know about design thinking? Please raise your hands to read the room. Design thinking, never. One, two, yeah, a few hands. So design thinking is an approach for designing things. It's being used a lot with the design of technology, but there is even design patterns, things that can be done even with kids. So they can design something using design thinking that involves empathizing first with the potential users or stakeholders that are going to be impacted by that system. And system, we can think that is a social-technical system, not only the technology. Then defining things with those people, with those participants, ideating, prototyping, testing, like actually developing something with the people who are the stakeholders, the users, etc. In learning or education, we're talking about doing this process with teachers and students in different combinations. At least with them, it can be with other decision makers, researchers, developers. So the first part of understanding is some of the ways in which we have approached it. Sometimes this happens at the beginning of designing something. We have invited pre-service teachers, for example, to ideate. Okay, if we want to create learning analytics for you, let's start with what are your problems. And for example, here we realize that 70 or 80% of the problems have nothing to do with data. And then obviously, if we are a learning analytics group, we were just focusing on those 15, 20%. So it sounded a bit that we are just speaking on the problems that we can actually address and not on the other problems. So that can give a different perspective when trying to innovate for education and learning. This was just one way to do it, called using a technique called card sorting. There's another adapted technique when we apply it to students facing challenges when they come to a nursing simulation. So a student put together or adapted a tool that is used to develop websites, the journey of what someone needs to go through when buying something in your website. So there's a technique to make sure that that's the easy flow in your website. So bringing this to education, it was okay, what's your learning experience as a student when you come to the classroom with the teacher? And then the students would identify, well, part of it was an opportunity for learn analytics. So you see that by designing and thinking about different tools that can be used for designing with students and with teachers, we start to see these things differently. This is a nice book if anyone's interested in design that we use in our center, Universal Methods of Design, where there are so many tools. It's kind of like almost like a pattern catalog. But this is for design tools that can be useful for different phases of the design process. And obviously, we can think about prototyping, asking students and teachers. This case is with both, something we did with both teachers and students, to think about, okay, if you have a reflective tool, how does this look like? And we started this in 2018, and look how was one of the first prototypes of the left, of your right, of the screen. And I will show you now how we have that. Those early prototypes became an actual system. But just have that in mind. But there is challenges, of course, and it would be ideal to work with students and teachers, but it's usually highly motivated students and teachers that would be willing to work on design. What happens if you are talking about K-12? Are we going to bring the kids to design a learning analytics system? So there's a bunch of different challenges in doing human-centeredness, and there can be lots of arguments against, but I'm also trying to convince you that there is lots of benefits. So it's something to consider and to bring it into projects in different extents. There are tools, for example, for the highly motivated, overrepresented participants in the design process. There's toolkits that, for example, the inclusive design toolkit has a bunch of tools to think and design with underrepresented members of our community. And actually, Nielsen is a KCI design person. He at some point he published a paper where he argues that designing solutions for underrepresented users can be beneficial for everyone. But if we design with the high achieving students, with the very interested teachers, then the benefits may not translate for the underrepresented. So there are different challenges. Very recently, a student in our center did a systematic literature review on human-centered learning analytics and AI in education papers. And we wanted to see how these methods have been applied with all these challenges, with arguments and on the benefits and also on how hard it could be. Well, the good thing is that there were lots of papers, 108 papers, and it was until 2023, July, if I remember well. So it's taking off. But what we discovered, for example, is that the stakeholders, like teachers and students, are usually involved in the middle of the projects, not so much in the scoping and definition phase, which is at the very beginning. It's like most of the time we already have an idea as the researchers or designers, and then we're already committing to the idea, and then we bring the teachers and students. And then also the launch and monitor, which is what happens after. We do a quick evaluation, and then what happens after, like once we actually deploy something, there is not much involvement. So it was very interesting to see what's the gap in this area. Now, I'm just gonna come with an example. We don't need to hear the sound. Anyway, it's not so loud. This is one example of the kind of one of the learning situations that we have been focusing on. These are nursing students that enter in this room where those are not real patients, they are mannequins, but they are mimicking as there's 4 patients there and one of them is suffering an issue and they need to realize. Imagine like a collaborative problem solving activity, very immersive, as a simulation as if they're in the hospital, because the next year they're going to be in the hospital. So they need to figure out what happens if they read the signals and there is someone who is dying if they don't react. And as you can imagine, here is not online learning. Okay, so There's lots of conversation, lots of communication, lots of body movement, lots of interaction with everything, with phone, with physical devices, etc. You can imagine it's complex, super complex. So I would say it's going into the high level of complexity, but it's not big data. So we were like, how can we support these learning activities? So we thought about, well, let's first enhance our data capture capabilities. So using sensors, we could identify, for example, from microphones, who's speaking with whom, from localization sensors, who is next to each other. So then the signals from the audio are more meaningful. It's like, I'm talking this side, there is someone here, and probably those persons I'm not having a conversation with the ones that are on the other side of the room. And physiological response, because some of from the learning design of the teachers, they were interested on reflecting on how they were feeling, how the students were feeling during these simulations. So if they feel too stressed, okay, having that conversation, how are you going to cope with that stress in the hospital next year? So it's a whole reflective activity that we are supporting. So that's why in the title of this talk, I mentioned, okay, let's focus on reflections and let's see if some of these things can translate to things that you're doing or that you may think that you can do in the future. This is one example of analytics that we created, actually inspired on sport analytics, because there was not much visualizations of spatial data with audio. So in this case, each color represents one student, one nurse. And if each of these hexagons have color inside, the stronger the color, the more conversation, the more audio was detected in the microphone. And we were using an algorithm to differentiate between noise and human voice. So there is human voice in those areas. So immediately we can think, most of the conversation was happening in that patient. So these are the 4 beds. This is looking from the top. And you can imagine we can filter and look at the temporality. So this is just one example of those visualizations that we started to explore. Other things that we started to investigate, something that I wish I could have done when I was doing my PhD, which was when we have students around a table talking with each other, can we get the transcripts automatically? Because it's nice to do analysis once we have the transcript and looking what they're saying. There was a lot of research, educational research on the micro actions and dialogue of collaborative groups. And it was until very recently with OpenAI Whisper that we started to get decent transcripts automatically, and then with large language models, also automated coding. So what we can do now is do automated transcript on the go, and then analyze automatically based on a code book what are the higher level codes associated with each of the utterances of the conversations that the students were having with each other. So we could understand, for example, if someone says shares a piece of information, I'm calling out, everything seems intact, she's got a lot of pain as well. He's raising the situation, and the other person is saying, okay, I see that as acknowledging, and we could start to create a network of these higher level codes. There is a tool that is called epistemic network analysis, which is a network where each of the nodes, instead of being people, like in social network analysis, is codes, either in a code book. And in the end, we can end up with a network of the things that the team was saying to each other, and start to find patterns of what are the things they are talking about. We are also exploring video. You can imagine this bunch of things that can be done. I'm not gonna jump to the most exciting things. So this is a tool that was co-created or co-designed with teachers. So we don't call it a dashboard. I call it more like a web orchestration application, because you can see that it has some visualizations, but the teachers they created this tool to use with a specific a specific pedagogical approach. So on the left, you can see that they are using the tool to tag important moments in the learning activity. And then after the simulation, they come to the debrief, which is a guided reflection. And then they use the tool to decide what they want to show. So they have full control of looking at the dashboard and say, yeah, for this case, I think I'm going to start working with all the visualizations, like in this case, sometimes with the video, based on an annotation. So they would decide what to use. And it's very different to an online learning platform where you really need to have something there for students, for teachers. In this case, this activity lent itself for an orchestration of the Learn Analytics tool. And as you remember, some slides before, the initial prototypes that some teachers were doing, well, we ended up with something like this a few years later, but it was a different and more comprehensive co-design process. And the good thing is that then we started to also co-design a tool for the students in exploring the use of GenAI chatbots. And this is one example. We have this visualization on the left. We tuned some of the visualizations, but we were exploring how a chatbot, because that's something that the students were asking, I need some guidance or to understand, digest these visualizations. So with this chatbot, we tuned the chatbot with a few bits of information. So when the student would ask a question like, who did I communicate with? Looking at the dashboard, you need to provide some context, and the chatbot would be asking for context. And this is what the inner workings of that chatbot is, which is through retrieval augmented generation, we provide information about the learning design. So in the learning design, there is already a description of who is whom in this simulation and what is expected to happen, what are the learning objectives, and what are the phases and all these things, how was all scheduled. There is information as well. For example, if the student says, oh, I'm the primary nurse too. In the learning design, there is already a meaning for that, right? So then the chatbot would record that in the chat history. So everything that the chatbot is going to present is going to be contextualized on that. So maybe you're familiarized a little bit with that. When you provide to a chatbot some context, then you get more contextualized responses. So minimize the problems of hallucination to some extent. And then if the chatbot starts to describe things like, okay, according to who do you communicate with, the chatbot has also information about the visualizations and how the data was collected and how the data was visualized. So it would make a description of the communication network, which is one of those visualizations. And if the student asks another question, go to the data procedures and selects what's the visualization that is more meaningful, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty much the idea is, with enough context provided, the chatbot can, in principle, describe the dashboard, right? So we thought it was interesting, and this was gonna solve all the problems, right? Because it's like having a little chatbot that they're describing the dashboard. So then we put it to the test in two different studies. One was with actual students working on their data. And we have another version, which was, instead of waiting for the students to write the questions, we already know from the learning design what the teachers want them to reflect on. So we co-designed a prompt that would give a summary of the insights that were important for that learning activity. And we put it back to an A/B test, and we are still analyzing that data, but we think that this is more the way to go in terms of preference in a small scale study. And in a larger study, which it was not on self, this is another thing, not on the self, not on self-reflection, we found out that there are different types of chatbots that can be generated. And I don't have the slides here, but let's put it for another thing, but I can describe it. So what we discovered is that the chatbot itself that is reactive, like the one that we have here, it was not as good as having a chatbot that was proactive. With proactive, we mean having an agent that is instructed to actually provoke reflection. So it's having information about the learning design, about the data, and the visualization was not enough, because then that means that the student needs to ask the right questions to get the right response. So we need to add a fourth source, which was indicate to the agent, follow this reflective pattern of how to conduct reflections first and ask these questions. So then the dashboard was prompting reflection. So the more proactive chatbot was the one that had better effects compared to this reactive chatbot. But we are still exploring this, right? It will be very interesting to discuss if anyone is interested in that. And we have been exploring other areas, as Nancy mentioned. Based on the human-centered approach, we are also thinking about data storytelling. So instead of thinking about just visualizations or a dashboard, what other ways we can use, what other ways of techniques we can utilize to communicate, not even data, but the actual story that is emerging from the data. Because the students do not need data. Well, what they need is to understand, to get feedback, right? And sometimes that feedback is articulated from the teacher perspective as a story or as human communication. So we explored, for example, this genre, which is data comics. And one idea was, what happens if we now with also GenAI, in this case, we use human power by Midjourney to retell the story based on the data. So the students can take a mini comic of what happened and changing some of these squares based on what happened in the activity and providing feedback in that way, like graphical and image or having visualizations with graphs. We tested this with nursing students in their third year, which is the last year in Australia, and they love it. I mean, especially the ones that were a bit otaku. But at the same time, they were saying, well, doesn't look, it's nice, it's cute, but it's not that professional. So I'm going to receive it. You know, if I want to take something home, I want something that is more like a report. But maybe this can work for K-12 or for other context or another country. So that's one that's an idea. And also I wanted to bring another project where we are bringing the same principles and similar technology, but now in the classroom, not in this specialized context, simulations. This is when we have multiple teachers orchestrating a whole classroom with multiple students. And we are using also audio, indoor positioning, and bringing different theory, which is that of spatial pedagogy. And you can see that we have a complex study, not so extremely large, but relatively large in terms of multimodal analytics. So we have multiple teachers in multiple weeks in different combinations, teaching different classes. We don't need to understand a table. That was the idea. And we are bringing similar tools and now co-design or adapting visualizations from that other context of healthcare into something that's more common, which is what happens when we have multiple teachers enacting the same learning design or intended to enact the same learning design in different classes, in different combinations, and how these analytics can support the reflection process, also using counting a few things and also having a bit of descriptive data using large language model as well. So the idea is here is to think out of the box, not always a dashboard is the solution. It can be a visualization, but maybe use text or a table or whatever is relevant for that particular objective. And yeah, I think it's gonna come back to the human-centered design message. So it's really hard to put ourselves in the shoes of others, even if we have good intentions and we think what the others are going through. It's really hard, so that's why it's important to think about teachers and students being involved in different extents. And for that, similar, for the same systematic literature review I was talking to you about, we also check to what extent students and teachers and other stakeholders, well, you can see that student teachers are the main stakeholders that are usually included in this kind of human-centered AI in education projects. Who are involved, who are invited more often to these projects. So we saw, apparently it's the students, right? 52%, but that 52% is for passive involvement. And we define passive as when you're just consulted, you just give feedback on something very simple, they're not involved in designing. Teachers are usually more involved in designing, but not that much students because of different reasons, because they're not experts on pedagogy, because of this, that, availability, etc. They are also moving targets, because if you ask a student in higher education, we work a lot with higher education, but also in K-12. If you are developing something to support students in this level, next year they are gone. So there are users that are just moving ephemeral users. But that's another thing to consider. And definitely the literacy that is required to provide meaningful input on the design process is really important. The level of data saving, the level of training is really important. And this is what I was talking to you about before, which is from 2015. I don't know if this has changed a lot, but this in this paper, the authors measure the extent to which students in higher education in STEM understood visualizations. And they found that very much, even for undergrad courses, we should not expect students to come into courses with proficiency in understanding data visualization, just when thinking about visualizing data in general to students. So imagine if that is already a challenge, what happens when we try to involve them into design? It's difficult. And this is acknowledged not only for learning analytics, it's applicable for everything, especially now that we have so many AI products. So co-designing AI is difficult because it involves a completely new, different technology, and the capabilities of using AI are not well understood by everyone, and it's moving really fast. And not even for us who are designing using AI, we cannot keep updated on all the capabilities that are possible out there and all the potential issues that can emerge. That's another whole thing in terms of bias, of lack of validity, etc. Okay. And the last challenge, and with this we're going to wrap up, is that of the power dynamics among researchers, designers, users, and stakeholders. And now, the more we use AI, the more these power dynamics are going to become much more evident. Is who makes the decisions, where are these responses coming from, what happens with the data sovereignty, the data, where is it is being placed. So it's a whole thing to unpack, but it comes hand to hand with using AI learning analytics in education as well, and especially when trying to involve students and teachers in the design process. There is already going to be power dynamics in play, depending on the projects. So a co-design perspective ideally breaks its power dynamics by giving the same voice to everyone. So that's why it's hard. So how are you going to have a student, a teacher, sit in the same table with a designer, and they all have the same voice? That sounds a bit scary, like, oh, the student has the same voice as the teacher. But what we say is like each student and each teacher has its own expertise. And Pierre Chunikin from the CSCL community in 2019 already warned us about this issue, that when we impose learning analytics or any AI, any data-intensive solution on top of learners, then we are making them passive beneficiaries of the whole system. And what he was saying is suggesting is that if learning analytics is going to play a role in education, it has to be limited to one of awareness and recommendation. And if we remember how the dashboards have been evolving into being more prescriptive, not that much into the awareness anymore, but we can see that it's easy, especially when using systems like GPT, when we can make more recommendations, we can influence more. This balance of power and agency can be easily disturbed. Okay, and this is what I was talking about. The experience of each user, each person is important. So even if we think how students may be experiencing learning, we don't know. Things change as well. And that's the message behind bringing them into the design process. So the key takeaways in terms of the human-centeredness, I touched on a bit of that storytelling and multimodal analytics here and there, but just to focus on human-centered design, AI is here to stay. I think we know that students are going to be using it. Teachers, we use it already. But we need to make sure that we are also here to stay in a way that AI can empower us, and design, I think, is the best way to tackle the issues of AI. Thinking about design, not only a product, but all the social technical system around the use of a tool. And there is a big difference between design with and design for, right? That's the other takeaway message. Big difference. There is no right or wrong. Sometimes we're going to have to design for. As teachers, we all the time design for students. There's not much leverage to just invite the students. Okay, let's co-design the curriculum. There is projects around co-design curriculum. But just having aware that there's two different things, that's already a good start. So we have this understanding that we are in a position of power. And human-centeredness is critical, or there are different words that are starting now to be used, because human-centered, there's criticism from some people say, let's do the activity-centered, not just the human, but all the things that the human is doing. That's a human-centered as well, but let's say human-centered or activity-centered. There is also an idea of the environment center, because AI can also have a strong impact not only on humans, but all our ecosystem. But anyway, thinking that it's not only technology center, whatever word we want to use is critical, especially when we are living now or approaching the age of living with AI in different ways and with very, very fast changes. And human-centered AI education has some particular challenges. Casual use, so the users are casual, especially talking about students. The effect that we're talking about there, moving targets. The expertise that each stakeholder has, that relationship between teacher and student, that's unique compared to other areas outside of education. And the skilled participation, which is if we want to really engage teachers and students and co-design whatever, an educational approach, intervention, or something with social technical system, is usually the very motivated students or teachers that are going to be there. So how do we tackle those issues? Yeah, I wonder if there is any comment, any question. Also from online, thank you so much for staying online. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And who is monitoring the channel? Okay, so, well, first of all, thank you very much, Roberto, for a very enlightening talk. You cover a lot of ground. And so I would like to first invite anyone here who might have any question or comments. Okay.
I do.
Can you say your name?
Yes, my name is Gulbadi Mehmet, and thank you so much for your presentation, first of all. And actually, well, I feel very related when you're talking about how to do this kind of human-centered design, because I did design a tool for my PhD study. And I invited students and teachers to get involved in the process. And I got a lot of like very great suggestions from the students because I asked them what kind of features do they want for a learning management system and stuff. And they gave really great recommendations on what they really want because they do know what they need to study better. And my question is, because you cover a lot on how to design or co-design or design with different stakeholders. And you also mentioned that one of the very important or critical steps in learning analytics is how we really give meaning to the data we collected, right? So my question is, from the human-centered perspective, what are the practices we could use to give a more reliable meaning to the data and make the data more meaningful to our users, for example, like students? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Nice to meet you. And before I respond to your question, thanks so much for the initial commentary. That should be a testimonial for those who wants to use human-centered design approaches. Because I know it's hard. It's an extra energy and extra coordination needs to be put forward, but then the benefits, can be evident once you get the feedback from students and teachers. And regarding the meaning of the data, yeah, that's something that we've been thinking about a lot, and also another Professor Nancy has been thinking deeply about the meaning of the data. And there is a whole community within analytics that have been talking a lot about the importance of alignment of the learning design and the learning analytics. So that's really important. What is the pedagogical intention? So one number is going to mean one thing in this particular context, but a completely different thing if you change the task, maybe. That's one way to see it, is how the meaning comes from learning design from the teachers. Another source of that meaning is from theory, the educational theory. So one of our students, she graduated several years ago, she was putting together an approach to first start from the learning design. Okay, let's say that example of the nurses. What happens if when the position of the nurse is next to a bed? Well, for this particular situation, the meaning is depending on the bed. It is the bed of the patient that is about to die. It's really important that it's there, but it's in another bed. Maybe if it's for too long, you haven't recognized what is the problem. But then other things like high effective collaboration. We already know a lot from theory. There's educational theory that talks about what is this closed loop communication. That's theorized, and you can observe it when we look at transcripts. So the meaning of codes, for example, things that happen, there's a little pattern there, that can come from the theory as well. So not everything needs to come from the teacher. So what happens when we have both sides, the educational theories and the learning design, provides a higher level meaning. But something that we have been focusing a lot is on particular tasks. That's something as well that is really easy to see in healthcare. That's why we love it so much. That is not so easy to see it in like, okay, let's have a collaborative activity now, a little bit more open. There's so many things that can be interesting there, and it's really hard to say which theory. Okay, collaborative problem solving maybe, but the learning design, many things can happen in different order, not necessarily how it happens when we know that nurses need to follow a procedure, or doctors. It's easier because there's procedures, there's recipes. But that also brings the point of a third source, which would be the literature or the knowledge for that particular context, like in healthcare, the procedures, which we could call it theory in education, but it's not theory, it's more like the literature or the guidelines of that particular context.
Yes, because I did use the theories yes. Yeah, because I did use theories on some of the some of the codes that have been used in previous studies to interpret the meaning of the data I collected, and I found there are still like some limitation. So I really hope that I would have done better job, probably do some like think loud analysis in my students too. Like what you're thinking while you're doing this, while you like completing or performing this particular type of task. So yeah, thank you so much for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Roberto. Actually, I did a systematic review on teacher-facing learning analytics. I got a lot of enlightenment from your studies. I really admire what you do on nursing simulation, data storytelling, and the co-design process. So my question is pretty much about it. Actually, it's from your presentation. You mentioned the power dynamics. So my question is, have you ever encountered design tension among teachers, LA researchers, and technicians? Because we know that they have different expertise. Teachers may prefer to use the dashboard they are more familiar with, but that might not be the best solution for the information. And sorry, I can ask second question about the chatbot. I'm really interested in the chatbot. Use the chatbot to help teachers to interpret the visualization. But I see the question actually takes a certain level of visual literacy. How can we help them to help teachers to ask the right question? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I need to check out your papers, or maybe you need to add it there to the slides of the systematic review on teachers dashboards. Yeah. The first question. What?
Dissertation.
Yeah, dissertation. Yes, sorry. So yeah, it has emerged a lot when we we had a small scale study a few years ago, but we didn't publish that work because there was little evidence about putting together students, teachers, developers, and researchers not from learning analytics from that particular area together. And because it was a small scale study, these tensions didn't emerge much. I mean, students remain a little bit quiet, but they were data science students, so they had the expertise to talk, and it was a special program of data science, so they were also very excited to talk. So we didn't observe the real tensions, but very recently we have a student that actually put students and teachers from nursing together to co-design this tool, which is a chatbot, by the way, for students. And we identified those tensions. Things, for example, the students wanted to see the heart rate because they're interested in knowing their stress levels. But teachers say, yes, but not for our joint reflection because that can cause things like that. Or sometimes, so that was more a disagreement and tensions between them. Like in the relationship of power, like teachers have a stronger voice, and it was really hard to address that. But other things we did, which is pretty much the example that you mentioned, which was we let teachers to co-design the visual interface. And sometimes we knew that was bad. Like some decisions were not good from visualization point of view. But we wanted to follow the co-design process and just tell them, we don't think that extra step is good. You're gonna have to have too many clicks to get what you want. And from an ergonomics point of view, that's not gonna work in the classroom. But they were insisting. So we decided, okay, it's a co-design process. So we're ready to present the arguments. Let's let it happen. And because it was also a research project, we wanted to know, okay, just do it. We'll see what happens. And there was a bottleneck during the first week of deployment. And they themselves say, okay, no, we don't need that button. They don't need those steps. We just need one push and things just go on the screen and everything streamlined as we knew it would happen from a HCI perspective. But it was good, and we allowed us to also do another part of research, which is design and use. Sometimes the tools need to go through that process. The teachers need to keep designing in use. It can be hard because it's hard to then change the tool that's already in production. But there's a whole discipline in design, which is designing in use. You cannot observe everything in the design phase until it's deployed and the design continues. And that's how it's done. Pretty much all these social networks, they do all that all the time. They deploy, they start making experiments. They see, oh, if we change this button, it's bad. Let's change it to this. Oh, So they do it without us not knowing. But yeah, that's a tension in the sense of, well, how can they go to design a user interface if they don't have UX expertise? So that's one thing. And the second one was about the chatbot. And you mentioned, so I clarified for students. And yeah, we're also doing research on AI literacy. I didn't mention, but to not bring so many concepts. But we are measuring as well what is the AI literacy and visualization literacy, so different tests of the students when they interact with the dashboard or with the visualization. In terms of visualization, the higher the visualization literacy, definitely the higher the outcomes. So it has been consistent, 3 studies. The higher the visualization literacy, the students, teachers, they consistently perform better in understanding and visualization. We already discovered that. Like indirectly, it was not a research question, which maybe should put it together. But that's really interesting. In terms of AI literacy about the prompting, we think that's the problem. When we have these other studies described, I didn't have the slides here, so no presentation. The proactive chatbot was more effective precisely because when we ask the students, yeah, you can ask any question. And if they really ask, please explain what is this visualization showing, it will provide a very nice explanation of that visualization. But the students didn't know that they had to ask that question. They didn't know how to ask that. So they needed to have a bit of a scaffolding to understand how to interact with the chatbot. So they needed to understand how to write prompts. And that was, we believe, is the bottleneck. So we have this larger study, we're still analyzing it, but so far, that's what we think. That's why proactive dashboards, which is, it's common sense, right? I think everyone is in education, right? We need a pedagogical approach, like how to scaffold interaction, not, okay, here it is, you can ask anything, but what can I ask? They don't know what they don't know. So that's a really great question.
So any other questions from the audience?
Professor, thank you for your presentation, and thank you so much. I really appreciate your notion about designing with and co-designing tools and also the chatbots. So I'm interested about how the process of co-designing and what roles do designers, researchers, and students and teachers play in the process. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, I would like to introduce one of my students that is actually writing a thesis on that question. So that's really good that you asked it. Yeah, I would respond in a simple way is that the role of the designers becomes the facilitator. In co-design, that would be the name. So the designers are everyone in co-design. If you talk about different names, like let's just do participatory design, human-centered design, there's still a designer. The researcher can be the designer, or the designer is the researcher, so it's a different person as well. But in co-design, it's very specific. In co-design, the co-designers are everyone. So it would be by the students, a teacher, one researcher, and they are putting together something. And this takes time. It's not just one session, but a few sessions. That become the co-design team. And the co-design team is made of co-designers. And the researcher or the designer become the facilitator. It facilitates the process, but it's not the designer. So it's really hard to make it like pure co-design if everyone is not actually buying into co-design. You can do something like that looks like co-design, but then the researchers take the decisions, right? And so it's a bit hybrid co-design with something that is more like a bit more driven by the researchers. So that question that you're asking is really interesting because if you look at the publications, co-design is being used very easily, like even in our early papers. And then we realized we're not really doing co-design because we are the designers. We are the researchers that are taking the decisions. So it was until we said like, no, we are all co-designers. So when the teachers started to say, I want my interface to look like this, and we knew that that was not going to work, we tried to negotiate, it didn't work. We had to go with it because they were the designers as well. So everyone was at horizontal decision-making power, let's say. So that's in co-design. Ideally, it's like that. And then like if we got strict with our work.
Well, actually, I want to pose a challenge. Okay, so when we talk about co-design, apparently there is a kind of like an ideal that everybody should be equal. But I would say it can never be. Okay, and it shouldn't be. Because now, first of all, you mentioned, sometime earlier, you said, you don't know what you don't know, right? So we can never, I think we should never be starting from nothing, and then everybody come to the table and put forward your idea. And particularly in the age of AI and GenAI, I think it should be a we should conceptualize it as a dynamic process of co-design. So because the designer, I mean, when we talk about research practice partnership, even in research practice partnership, usually it would be the researchers who call the shots first. But of course, it doesn't have to be. Sometimes it's the practitioners who come forward with a problem and then asking, can we work together or can you help me with something? So but in that sense, the practitioner is already an expert in the context of what they do. And so you have to be starting somewhere because you need to have a goal. And so there are key decisions that needs to be made. But then once that's done, obviously, if you are the designer, you've got a product, you also need your users to want to use it. And so that is an issue. But also, I think in terms of the user, it depends on who the users are, right? If we're talking about users who are, say, for example, the student nurses, if they're just first-year student nurses with the first experience, they actually have no idea of what it could be. So it has to be that they need to be scaffolded into the situation, and then they should then be able to shift. And in a way, I want to sort of think about, you started with a new definition of human-centered design. And I'm actually wanting to suggest a kind of like a spin to it, whether when we talk about the human-centered design, we probably need to be going from the designing for towards the designing with. Because at the end of the day, we really want the students or whoever were the users to be empowered, and they have the agency to make decisions. And it's a bit like, say, when we think about parents or teachers, you start with someone who's pretty novice, and then you want them to grow and be able to take on everything by themselves. But that would be a process. And how do we scaffold that as a progressive process would be something that would be quite challenging. And with the Gen AI, we have the technology which is also able to learn. So I think that seems to be quite an interesting possibility.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's why in our conversation, in our team, we sometimes don't use co-design as the word. We are like, okay, no, let's use human-centered design or design thinking, just because there is a community of co-design, and they are like that, like some people. So we brand like that our research and then submit it to, and the reviewer co-design checks, they can criticize. That's why we made that difference, and we just use sometimes human-centered design, and I agree that we shouldn't start from scratch all the time because it's not practical. we need a framework. And sometimes what we do is to, like, for example, we co-design something with the students, but it was a spin-off of a project that was already designed or co-designed, well, co-created with, that's what the name was, co-created with teachers without the students, because it was a tool for teachers. And when we came to the student-facing tool, okay, let's bring the students and teachers together, let's co-design this little bit. But it was already set in with some sort of boundaries. And some of the things that students wanted just didn't make it because of any number of reasons. So I agree. When we started designing with the students and teachers, we realized that, okay, at some point someone needs to, things need to be prioritized, and pedagogy obviously needs to be prioritized, and students are not trained in pedagogy. So it's something that needs to be acknowledged, that their input shouldn't be about pedagogy because the expertise is different. But it could be from the lived experience of what does that mean to be a student. So I feel like recognizing that each stakeholder has different expertise, and also each one has different experience. But then the decisions, yeah, that's a whole thing. You know, if someone brands the research as co-design, ideally should be more democratic, or just use human-centered design and just, okay, the teachers in the end are going to decide on the things that are related with pedagogy, for example. That's it. Or the project needs to deliver this thing. Well, it needs to deliver, yeah, because we need to go to a certain objective.
Is there any further questions or comments or sharing? Yes, okay, yes.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for all the sharing. I think it's very, very inspiring. Just got me thought of one conversation I had with another colleague over the Faculty of Dentistry last week, because he's a very passionate teacher and he has been involved in analytics projects, and he has a lot of amazing ideas about how the dashboard or learning systems should be designed. And we had a conversation, and he really wanted everybody to use that. Like the fantastic tool he has designed. I think that's cool. But then we got the conversation basically went to, right, we really need to engage all the stakeholders. We need to talk to different, other users, potential users of this tool. So a lot of your talk actually remind me of that conversation. I think my question is, I see this dilemma. Like in one way, we're really trying our best to create this our local understanding, or really bring the community together and design the best tool for us. But on the other hand, we're trying to advocate our tool and says, hey, this is the best thing ever, and it's going to solve the world's problem, which is probably not going to be true all the time. And every time we try to promote these to the community beyond the community we're already in, we have this challenge, right? Someone sees our tool and says, that does not make any sense to me, or it has a pretty steep learning curve. So I wonder what would you think about this, and have you done anything try to address this challenge?
Thank you. Yeah, actually, Don Norman, who was advocating for human-centered design for many years, ended up criticizing human-centered design at some point, because he was arguing that lots of good inventions were not the result of human-centered design process. I think that the car that is a design that has survived, well, now it's starting to transmute into something else. But the design has been consistent for so many years. It was not human-centered design. It was designed for. And there are so many other examples. There's the argument about thinking about the activity, not always about the involvement of stakeholders in the design. Also, there's I don't know if you ever watched The Simpsons, but Homer at some point was asked to design a car, and it was a complete disaster, like, because he didn't have the expertise. And so, yeah, I agree. Like, not everything needs to be designed in the way of human-centered design. However, human-centeredness is not only the inclusion of students and teachers. I may emphasize too much that bit, So human-centered, for example, human-centered AI is one of the other 3 or 4 areas that involve ethics, that involve the impact on the humans, on the environment. So it goes beyond inclusion. Actually, there is or involvement. Sorry. There is actually a paper by Charles Lang in Learn Analytics in like 3 years ago, I think, where he was criticizing precisely that. Is like, oh, what do we mean by user involvement in Learn Analytics or something along those lines in the title? And he was questioning like what is really involvement? And when we did the systematic review, we were also looking at the different levels of involvement. We even have a design thinking project where, as Nancy was suggesting, we have some phases where there is involvement. Some other phases there's only the researchers making the decision because we need to make a decision in terms of user interface, and there is no students with user interface design expertise. So we already had enough evidence. Okay, let's move on. And you work well. So yeah, like some innovations just go that way. But there is also proven benefits of involving the stakeholders. So like in design, there is no rules, there are guidelines. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We've been spending 75 minutes in a very intensive and very engaging manner. And thank you so much. Can I invite all of you to join me in thanks very much, and looking forward to seeing you all in the next seminar.